Hey, we are live.
Well, I'd like to call a special meeting of the school board to order. Toby, would you mind doing the roll call?
Peter Turk,
Here.
Barry Schmeling.
Here.
We are live. Oops, sorry.
Well, I'd like to call.
Barry Schmeling, I'm sorry.
Here.
Taylor Wishaw,
Here.
Marlo Brown,
Here.
Roseanne Hahn,
Here.
Susan Kessler,
Here.
Evan Bird. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Toby. Our first item on our agenda is the budget. So we have budget amendments for 2020 and 2021, and then the preliminary 21-22 budget. So Ruth, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I tried something different and did a more of a slide show to pull the summary together rather than going through those pages and pages of detail. So if you don't mind, we'll try that. The detail is still attached under the 21-22 section. You know, if you want to go through any of it as we go or at the end, we certainly can. But we'll try this if you're game here. All right, I'm gonna try to share my screen.
Are we going through the budget adoption first or the budget?
Well, so the summary I have has both years on it. So
Okay.
if we can kind of just have that discussion on both as we go. Under the 2021 budget amendment, there's that DPI format. And then the detail is, I just had it once under the 21-22 has both years in it. And then I do have the draft of the budget publication that it just kind of really shows in a nice condensed summary what the changes are. So there's kind of 4 documents that cover both years. So if you don't mind, we'll just do the PowerPoint and hopefully that answers most of the questions, and then we'll catch the others as we go or at the end. All right. Can you see this? Should say 21-22 preliminary budget.
Yes.
Sweet.
We're good, Ruth.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So now it's not letting me page through it. It only has the first screen. Any suggestions?
Can you scroll? That works on my computer.
It's not.
Just, is there any chance that your cursor is not in that actual tab?
Oh,
There you go.
apparently, okay. I just have to hit the keypad. Sorry, I'm part of the learning curve. Okay, so just briefly is just the main variables that we'll go through. So the pupil count, the revenue limit formula, of course, our favorite, all the other revenues, and then the expenditures. Okay, so enrollment, there's different ways to look at this. So if you look at the headings across the top, I have 2 years of history of actual. And then for next year, I have a low and a high just because there's such a variance between like the 4K and 5K, and we're not sure until they actually get what that will be. So I thought we could show the range, and I actually just picked the middle point, a strict average for building the budget, but just showing you that range. And those small numbers in parentheses underneath are the change from the previous year. So for example, that first row, enrollment, so that's the students that are actually sitting in the desks in our buildings. So in 2019, we had 3,104, and then was a decrease of 31 from the year before. So that's what that small number is underneath. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just walk you through one row just to show you. So then enrollment in actual of this past fall was 3,001. So you can see that went down 103 from 2019. And then for 21, we're projecting either a low point of 2009-16 or a high point of 3012, which is similar to this year. Okay, then if we, and I can't see faces as I'm presenting, so if you have a question, just interrupt me, please. So then kind of going down that September pupil count, that's what we report to DPI. So we take the first line, who is ever sitting in our seats. We subtract the open enrollments in, and then we add the open enrollments out. So that September pupil count, we're only reporting the resident, the students that are residents. Okay. Then we take that a step further, then we have to convert that to what we use for the revenue limit formula. So we take the September pupil count and convert it into full-time equivalents. So for example, the 4K students, we only get to count as a 0.6, not as a 1.0. So we've converted now the September count to the revenue limit FTE. So if you go to the projected high and low, there's 3155 of a low and 3237 for a high. I used 3196 right in between for building the budget. And then that bottom line is just more informational. The 3-year revenue limit average, which we use in the formula. So that number is actually what's going to carry forward to the next page of the revenue limit. Yay. Okay, so now we actually get to the revenue limit. Well, I'm laughing because there's a number I want to start with on the 2021 column, but it's on the next page and I'm not going to know how to get back. Sorry. So I'm going to focus on this middle column where it says projected low 21-22. So this prior year revenue limit of 36,283,000 at the bottom of the 2021 column on the next page, that's where we actually ended last year. So that just comes forward to the new school year. But then we have to subtract the prior year, what we call non-recurring exemptions, or the 1-year add backs. So that's where I was subtracting that 1,128,000. And then we get to that first blue line, the prior year base revenue limit of 35,154,000. Okay, so we're always starting where we ended the year before. Then we take that 35 million and we look at it, it as a per pupil amount. So we take that divided by the previous 3-year average. So if you look in the 2021 column, I'm taking that divided by 3,278. And then we get a per student amount is that $10,724.46. So when you hear the state talk about a per pupil increase or not, this next line, the per pupil increase, is what they're talking about. So are we going to increase the amount per pupil that we're using in the revenue limit or not, or by how much? So anything that I'm hearing lately is that this per pupil increase is going to be 0. The governor's budget was initially $200, which I'll explain that impact in a little bit, but I use 0 for now just because that seems to be where the trend is going. So we do not get to increase that per pupil base then. So we still take that $10,724, except now we take it by the current 3-year average times that 3,231. And then we get that second blue number, that subtotal of $34,650,000. Now I have that highlighted in blue because I want you to compare that to the blue number, that base revenue up above. So you'll notice that it's less. So there's a provision in the revenue limit formula that says, okay, we don't want you to start out the year lower than where you ended the year before. So they have this hold harmless add back to get us up to that 35 million. So whether we have the low or the high number, we get to add back either 500,000 or 200,000 to get us back up to that 35,154,000, that blue number up above where we started. Okay, so that's our first add back for the year. Good to move on? Okay, so that top line, I just brought it forward from the page before. Then in the formula, there's always, well, usually, exemptions that we get to add back. So there's two different types. There's recurring, that's an ongoing permanent add back. Typically, there aren't many of those. The one we can usually get a little bit of money on is this transfer of service. So if there's a student that moves into our district that has high costs associated with them, typically that's in the special ed area. So if it's a student that perhaps needs a one-on-one aid or a certain purchase service, maybe like audiology or an interpreter or something that we have to add a cost, we can file with DPI to get that cost permanently added to our revenue limit, so we have the revenue limit to cover the cost. Then in red, we have all these non-recurring exemptions that are one-year add backs that will go away the following year. So if you look at that 2021 column, those bottom two numbers, that's where we started 21, 22. So that's where that played in. So again, if we just look at that middle column, the exemptions I'm anticipating we would be able to take advantage of this year are the declining enrollment exemption. So they give you a one-year add back to plan for next year, your revenue limit's going to go down by that much. There was a little bit of tax money, these refunded taxes that we had to pay back to the one of the municipalities. So then they let us put that back on to recoup that money from other taxpayers. That open enrollment adjustment, now that we have open enrollment outside of our just spring window, we have it all year. If there are students that are added to our count after that September pupil count, they factor that in here because we didn't have the opportunity to build them into this revenue limit formula. So the state does an adjustment behind the scenes. And then we have the private school vouchers. So the private school voucher is an add here, but it's also an expense that we have to, at the end of the school year, pay that amount out to the school. So that's an in and an out. So if we look then, the total non-recurring exemptions in that middle column is 1,569,000. Or you can see in the high column, it's 1,268,000. So then we get to that bottom line as our net revenue limit for the year. Now, since I used a pupil count that was in between, the revenue limit that I actually used is right in between the second and the third column. So it's 36,573,000. So not huge variance either way, but still it's a little bit different. So now next year for the following year, 22, 23, we would start with one of these bottom, the 36 million number, but we're going to subtract those non-recurring exemptions. They're going to go away the following year. And that hold harmless from the previous page also will be subtracted. So I just want you to understand that's a one-year add back and then it's going to go away. Okay.
Ruth, it goes away though if we have declining enrollment again though. We would have another one, wouldn't we?
There would be another add back next year, correct? If it continued to decline in 22, 23. Okay, we looked at this graphic back in I believe it was April, and I just want to kind of revisit this again. So this right revenue limit line, that red line, where it says this line cannot move. The only way that line moves is if there is more, either more students. So you're multiplying that per pupil amount times more students. Or if we get more per pupil, in addition to that per pupil amount. So where we had 0, if that were say $200, then that revenue limit line would move. So as of right now, that revenue limit line isn't moving. We aren't getting any new money. So this plus line in the middle here, perhaps if we get more state aid, that would give us some property tax relief, but it's not going to change the total revenue. So I think that's an important concept that we need to grasp. Okay,
Ruth, can I ask another question?
sure.
Going back to the hold harmless. So let's say if we did receive $200 a year in pupil increase, wouldn't that essentially, that's about 600,000? That's pretty close to the hold harmless amount, right? So we're going to end up in the same place regardless. Isn't that kind of fair to say?
So that's where, yep, that's kind of the perfect lead into this, where what I was going to say is for us to get, even at $50 or $100, we're not going to get any new money because of that hold harmless provision. Just takes us back to, it's only getting us up to, it's only going to kick in if we are over higher than that previous year amount. So we're going to have to get up to about $150 per pupil before we go higher than that 35 million on that base revenue where we started. So at $150 per pupil, that would give us like 138,000 new revenue, and $200 would give us about 300,000. So it's not straight math applied to that average, because we still have to cross that hurdle of the prior year base.
Right, basically, it has to wipe out the hold harmless first
Correct.
before any revenue kicks in. So it's a good point, Peter.
Does it affect the 3-year average though? If we receive the $200 a year?
Well, the 3-year average is the pupil count.
Oh, it is. Okay, so it's not the revenue limit.
Correct, it's the pupil
All right.
count. So if we had more students, that would play into that as well. So if we had both. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts in there, but yeah. Okay, we go then to kind of move on to the, we'll start putting it kind of in a revenue expense summary format. So I did combine on these next couple slides, our general fund 10 and special ed fund 27, just because they go in hand so much. And those are the major instructional funds that we budget for, and then just eliminated that transfer that happens. Because I think it just gives us a better picture of what is the budget for the instructional purpose. So I have as you can see, the column for 2021. So this is like the proposed final. And then the 21-22 budget, and then the difference is in the right-hand column. So those first 2 line items are the property taxes and the state general aid or the state equalization aid. Those are those 2 main components of the revenue limit. So if you see the difference there in the far right-hand column, there's about almost $300,000 difference, but we just said that there's no new revenue. So that 300,000 difference is, we have some non-referendum debt, which we'll talk about later, that has to come under the revenue limit. So that's the difference, is about it's $295,000. So that's why there's a difference here, because we have to cover that amount, that non-referendum debt levy out of the revenue limit. So it reduces the amount available to general fund. Then going down that per pupil aid amount, that's the $742 times our 3-year average. Everything I'm hearing is that is still in place at that level. It might go down $1 or $2 per pupil, but not any increase. So the little bit of difference there is from the declining enrollment. The special ed aid this year is at 28.2%. Anything I'm hearing lately is we should expect no increase to that for 21-22, so still at 28%. Then we have other state aid, so that's all the other categorical aid we get, like transportation, library, those types of things. So that always changes slightly. Then we have this ESSER federal aid I just want to spend some time on. So has different acronyms. The first round was called the CARES Act. So in 2021, originally we had budgeted about $385,000. So of that, 40,000 we had to allocate to the parochial schools. So that left us like 345,000. So we had that scheduled to be used for we brought in a cleaning service to do some extra cleaning last fall. We had cleaning supplies, PPE and medical supplies. We budgeted for some technology to help with learning and to provide hotspots. So we had pretty much that whole 385,000 budgeted. Well, now that we got to the end of the year, we discovered we had about 114,000 left. So we will be submitting to DPI a budget amendment to use that 114,000 towards paying for the JEDI bill for that tuition. Now we also have, you've probably heard about ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 that have all these fun little acronyms, but we'll just call them 1, 2, and 3. So the second one, our allocation is about 1.5 million. So we will be submitting to have the remainder of that JEDI bill, or about 820,000, to come out of this federal aid. So an increase of 385,000 up to the 1.2 million to be used to pay that full JEDI bill of 934,000, which in a couple screens you will see that has allowed us to balance our budget for 2021. We did not put anything in there yet for 21-22. We are still administratively working through how to best spend that money. If we do put something in here, it's going to just cover the increase in cost. So it would be an in and an out. So it's not going to affect the bottom line. 2 has no parochial allocation. And then there's ESSER 3, also does not have a parochial allocation. And that one is 3.4 million. However, what we have to talk about there or explain a little bit is at the state level, they're talking about 0 per pupil because school districts have ESSER money available to them. So they're expecting us to use this federal aid for our operating costs, not for the one-time costs. Or under the third bucket, they're telling us we have to spend 20% towards learning recovery. So that's about 700,000. However, the state is also putting at risk the ability for us to get money under ESSER 3 because there's a little regulation called maintenance of effort, which basically means you have to keep spending at or above the same level that you did the previous year. So right now under 21-22 at the state level, the latest that they're proposing is not keeping the state, they're not meeting that requirement. They're not spending at or above the level that they were before. So they're jeopardizing possibly our ability to get that federal aid that at the same time they're telling us to use. So that's a little bit of a dilemma that we have to see how that's going to play out yet. So for sure we have one available we can spend. Two, we're pretty sure is available, but I'm hearing a little bit that that might be impacted as well from that state spending level. But our plan right now is to submit that, to have that JEDI bill covered and balance our budget for 2021. Any questions on that before we keep moving here? Okay. So the other federal aid, that's our Title ESSER money, so Title I, Title II, and it's also the special ed IDEA aid. That's going down a little bit because we've had some carryover money that we are trying to spend out. And then, so next year we would just be starting with the base allocation. And then all the other revenues don't really change much. So you can see then the grand total at the bottom, revenues would be going down 1.3 million, but of that 1.2 million is that federal ESSER money. And we have, in 2 slides, we'll have it, I'll pull this all together here for you. So we go down revenues then for now?
Yes.
Okay. So now on the expenditure side, so same 3 columns. Just pulled out those main categories of expenditures, still combining funds 10 and 27, general and special ed. So salaries we have built in there, the 1.23% CPI increase. That we do have lane moves for teachers. I use 210,000, which is my best guess right now based on who I think is taking credits or in a master's program. It could be close to 400,000 if everybody did something. So I tried to use what I thought was a realistic estimate. We did, for discussion purposes, put in a placeholder for a human resources director. So that's in there. Then moving down, health insurance, that was a 5% increase. But just so you can see what kind of dollar amount that is in total. Other fringe benefits, that includes, so then the contribution to the Wisconsin retirement system, Social Security, dental, the HSA contributions. So that's what's in that line. Purchase services. So this is transportation, both general and special ed. Tuition, so that would be the open enrollments out. It would be the JEDI bill. So that's why when you see a decrease there of 733, 934 of that was JEDI from this year. The private school voucher program, that's where that expense is, utilities. Then we have the non-capital materials. So that's just materials and supplies for classroom, cleaning, medical. And capital outlay is equipment purchases. So that doesn't change too much. And then the all other is like our lease payments, our liability insurance, there's interest on our short-term borrowing. Again, that doesn't change too much. And then we have the total expenditures. You can see went down 572,000. So revenues went down, expenditures went down, but revenues went down by a larger amount. So, and then the next slide, we'll pull it all together. So the first three columns are, again, current year budget. So total revenues, total expenditures, you can see they agree. So we were able to balance the budget. So no change in our fund balance. Then the second column, the 21-22 budget, we had more expenditures than revenues by 801,000. So that would decrease our fund balance. In the difference column, those are those totals then where you can see where we were just talking about revenues went down, expenditures went down, but by different amounts. And then that last column, I just tried to factor out, I took that ESSER money, the revenue and the expenses out to see more of a true picture of what's happening with if we didn't have that. So revenues would go down 148,000 and expenses would go up. So that's more of the true picture what's going on if we factor that out. So still getting to that same deficit of 801,000. What questions do you have on that or to this point? Otherwise, if there are none, we could quickly go through the other funds. Okay. So here's that Fund 38, the non-referendum debt. So in that revenue line, there's 295,000 of tax levy that falls under the revenue limit. The other 330,000-ish is the lease payments that we collect from Gateway to be used toward the debt that's associated with those buildings. So in and out. These payments stay pretty steady, so it's just that revenue covering these debt payments. Here's the referendum debt. So the referendum from November 2018, this is all that's left in this fund is just that one debt. That first line under revenues, that difference column is going down 590,000. If you remember in 2021, we levied about 574,000 extra to do that debt defeasance. So that's why the 2021 budget is that much higher. Otherwise, it's going to stay pretty steady around that 2.9 million. So then the expenditures, that's strictly the debt payments. Again, we have the additional cost there because we did that additional payment. Otherwise, that's pretty straightforward there. Capital projects. So this is where the money that we borrowed from the referendum while we're in the process of in the middle of the project completion, we have to account for these costs separately in this fund. So 2021, you can see we spent 23 million of that borrowing. So our ending fund balance was 7.5 million. So the majority of that was the Kircher building that we built this year. Moving forward to the 21-22 budget. This summer, we anticipate finishing most of those individual building projects. So an ending fund balance there of 550,000, which would just be a little bit of a carryover if there's something next summer that we didn't get to. So pretty much this upcoming school year, this will be spent. food service. The main item in the 2021 budget, we did include initially 250,000 to be used for equipment for the new Karcher. The final bill came in at like 317,000, so I did increase that amount to cover that whole cost. If you recall, we for the past several years have had to submit a plan to the state to spend down our fund balance. We're only supposed to have 25% of our expenditures. So we pretty much need that cost to spend down that balance to that threshold that they're expecting us to stay under. So still certainly in a decent spot with a fund balance there. For 21-22 budget, those numbers kind of reflect back to, I don't know, business as usual. So for 2021, if you recall, we were able to take advantage of the summer food service program and have free meals all year. So 21-22 initially put this to paid meals, but I'm hearing recently that we are able to take advantage of it's called seamless summer option, where I believe we will be able to offer free meals again for 21-22. I'm exploring that option. So that would be awesome if that would play out that way. So either way, it's probably going to be a similar amount, perhaps even more revenue because those reimbursement rates are higher. Community ed, pretty much that stays pretty constant. In the revenues, there's $70,000 of budget. The other 130 are the program charges from the participants. That's pretty much stayed the same for several years. And then the Fund 99, the cooperatives, that the only cooperative we have for this year and for next year is the Fox River Consortium. So the increase for 21-22 is to increase the couple of part-time teachers up to full-time. They want to do a little bit of program expansion. So trying to give them the ability, the staff to do that. That was it for going through the funds. So just any questions before we get to the tax levy then? Okay, so here's the tax levy summary. The four funds that make up that total are the general fund. So that's where we kind of started our discussion tonight. Then that non-referendum debt. So that's the part that falls under the revenue limit that we have to cover. The referendum debt, which we have the ability to go above the revenue limit to cover those debt payments. Community service is also outside of the revenue limit. So a proposed tax levy increase of $313,000. In that middle column would be an increase of 1.4% over the 2021 budget. Or if you want to convert that to a mill rate that's used for the tax bill, that would actually be a decrease if I assume a 2% property tax increase. Or property value increase, sorry. I do want to point out on here the levy change. If we did not do that debt defeasance, the levy change for 21-22 would be just over 4%. And then the mill rate would have gone up 2%. So I still think it was a great thing that we did. We were able to, in 2021, still have a no levy increase. We were able to get like a 40% return on that $573,000. But then it also keeps this increase for 21-22 at a more reasonable level on a trend line. So I guess going forward, historically, this is the budget we've taken to the annual meeting. We've kind of moved that back to September now. So if there are any major changes between now and the time we have to do some budget publications, we may bring this back to adjust the budget for what we take to the annual meeting. But for tonight, we need to do a couple of action items. We need to approve the 2021 budget amendments. So there's a couple of different ways you can look at that one. There's the DPI format. That budget publication is just a summary. And then we have the detail. And then we also need to approve the 21-22 preliminary budget so that we have something to start July 1st with. So that we only have the detail. I won't have that DPI format until fall. So 2 action items, the 2021 final budget amendment and approve the 21-22 preliminary budget.
Ruth, before we go on to that, can we back up to the combined net change slide for funds 10 and 27? I want to make sure I understand this. Thanks. So I'm looking at the 2 columns that say difference and difference without ESSER.
Correct.
So regardless of whether we get ESSER funds for the next school year, we're looking at a structural deficit in our budget. I'm at $800,000. Is that right? That, I mean, we just, it's not going to matter.
As of what we know right now.
Okay. And then looking at the revenues, the other federal aid went down 350,000. If you scroll up a couple slides, you went through it, but I missed it. Why did that go decrease?
There were some carryover monies that we have in 2021 that we're spending so that in 21-22, we're just back to the base level. We won't have that carryover amount. So for example, the federal special ed idea money. This year, DPI is highly recommending we spend as much as we can. So we've had like, I think it was like 180,000 of carryover. So I increased the 2021 budget to try to spend that down. So we'll have like 869,000 of expenditures for that special ed program. Now 21-22, we won't have that 180,000 carryover. We're just going to be back to the base allocation of like 630,000, I think it was. So that difference right there is probably 240,000 of that 359. So it's spending down these additional carryover amounts that we've had. They've been unspent in previous years that like last year, a lot of it was because of COVID. That we didn't spend them like we thought. So now we're spending them in 2021 and won't have that carryover again in 21-22. So it's like additional money we had in 2021 that we will not have in 21-22.
Understood. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on these slides before we go? I ask for a motion.
Well done, Ruth, as usual.
Thank you.
So we're going to be 800,000 short this year and more than that short next year.
Well, I think right now, this is what we know right now. We'll obviously adjust this in the fall. We anticipate to continue to use attrition when we can. So we knew that was going to take a couple years rather than just laying people off. So that'll take time as people, resign or retire for us to take advantage of those savings. We will look at ESSER money to see what we can use there. We will perhaps use some fund balance. We'll probably have a combination of all of this. We don't know if we're going to get new money from the state. Perhaps between now and when the state budget is done, there will be some new money in there that we can increase our revenues. So we'll adjust this for fall to either balance it or get it real close to balanced. And then that will impact the future as well. So I would not anticipate that 800 to continue to snowball. We will make adjustments so that that will not happen. We just wanted to present to you, this is what we know right now. And there's so many unknowns. We didn't want to make too many assumptions. We knew it sounds like a large number, but it's still reasonable. There's a way, we feel like we can get to a pretty close balanced budget by fall.
Sure.
And
Thank
Barry,
you. So
If
Go ahead,
I
Steve.
could, Barry, I was just going to add that I think as Ruth and I have had conversations about this, and to Peter's point as well, we do recognize that there's a little bit of a gap and a sort of a structural deficit in cost. It's one of the reasons we're trying to think very long term with certain solutions. So the conversation around our insurance plan, the board's support of a wellness initiative to try to reduce those costs long term. As Ruth pointed out, the discussion of attrition, as we talked about back in April with the budget, over kind of the next 3 to 5 years to sort of right size some things and draw down some of those expenses. And then just, finally, to sort of reinforce what Ruth said, is we wanted to make sure the board understood what we believe to be essentially the worst case potential scenario, and do hope and even believe that it will improve over the next few months as joint finance and the state legislature work together to sort of finalize what's going to happen with the state budget. And so certainly this includes sort of everything, hoping and believing that it then won't get worse. So it does include the consumer price index increase. It does include the insurance increase. It includes those lane moves and some of those other big ticket prices without any new revenue.
Any other questions or comments from board members? If not, I guess I'd entertain a motion. It could be a double motion, or we could tackle both things to approve the 2020-21 budget amendments and the preliminary 21-22 budget.
I move we approve the 2021 budget amendments as noted, as well as the preliminary 21-22 budget as noted.
I second that.
All right, thanks. So a motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Toby, will you do a roll call, please?
Peter,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Marlowe,
Yes.
Roseanne,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth.
Yep. Thank
Budget.
you.
Great work.
Next on our agenda, we have 4 items for action. The first one are new positions to the district. And this is a holdover from past meetings where we discussed 2 potential new positions. One Ruth just mentioned would be a director of human resources that is built into the budget. And the other is a director of equity. And I guess it's titled and/or, so we can consider one, both, or none. So I guess I suggest we pick up our discussion from past meetings, but and perhaps we start with a motion, but maybe we tackle these separately. That might be a good way to handle it. So would somebody, when they can make I guess I'd ask for a motion to decide if we're going to move forward with either one of the positions.
Well, why would we make a motion when we don't even know what the price tag of these are?
I think that was discussed in past meetings, Taylor. Did we not? Somebody can maybe remind me, but I thought we talked about like what the range of salaries plus benefits were. I recall that being brought up at a past meeting. There's a market value. We should have a pretty good idea what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm. I can certainly make an attempt there, Peter. I think for a director of human resources, we're probably somewhere in the range of about 110,000 as a salary. And then any benefits would be in addition to that. The director of equity or a family and community engagement type position, that could have a bigger, broader range. And it would depend a little bit on how that position was formed and sort of put together. But probably on the low end, that salary could be 75,000. On the high end, that salary could be upwards of the 110, right, with human resources. So it's kind of, that one's a little bit more vague because those positions have all sorts of different titles. But the human resources one's a little bit more clear because it's just a more common position.
And don't misinterpret me. When I ask for a motion, I'm not saying that we were necessarily plowing forward to approve these. But under Robert's rules, we should have a motion first, seconded, and then discussion before we start delving in. That's my thinking.
Well, the HR person, that salary and so forth is already in the budget. Is that correct? According to Ruth's.
That is correct. We had, given the fact that this had been a conversation with the board for many, many months, just and somewhat casual about whether or not that position would be necessary. We built it into the budget, perhaps with the assumption or hope that that might be the direction you'd want to go. And it's a lot easier to take it out than it is to add it back in, was our thinking.
Okay.
And on the other side, if I recall, the director of equity position or however we title it, that may be able to be paid out of ESSER funds, but at this point, we don't know if we're going to receive ESSER funds. But that was the thinking, that it may qualify as an ESSER expense. That's
Correct.
my recollection.
We do, both Ruth and I, as we've talked to various different folks, believe that that position, equity-based, community-based, family outreach and support, that type of position would absolutely fall within the qualifications as outlined by ESSER, and that'd be ESSER 2 or 3.
Well, I guess there's some questions on the HR director. I guess, is the pay comparison coming from private or public sector? I guess to qualify or to quantify the 110,000 salary, because I was. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That number is public sector. That's not even public sector. It's schools. I just simply looked at those schools, like size schools, those schools that are slightly bigger than us, Stoughton, Onalaska, South Milwaukee. Those schools that are just slightly smaller than us, Cedarburg, Baraboo, Pewaukee, Tomah. These are all schools that have an HR position. And so Ruth and I have been doing some comps and some analysis to see, in order to recruit and find somebody who'd want to do that work, that's about the going rate. Some people are much higher than that. They're at 130. There's a few that are a little lower than that are in the high 90s or just breaking 100. And so we felt like kind of a safe bet, to be fair and to be transparent about it, it's probably in that 110 range.
Does it have to be a director of human resources? Can it be a support person as opposed to a director?
I mean, ultimately, it can be what you want it to be. But I would tell you that with an organization of, when we run salary, we're typically over 500 employees. And the level of expertise to assure that we're staying compliant with both state and federal law is becoming more complex all the time. And that level of expertise typically would come with somebody with specific training, either in human resources and or a related field, whether that's management in the public sector, maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's somebody with a legal background. But at the end of the day, it's a level of expertise that would really make the difference.
I would also add, Steve, maybe that if that person's expected to be involved in like employee, like personnel matters or perhaps disciplinary action, that really would need to be a director level, not a supervisory level.
excuse me, I know he said this before in past meetings, but and I think we've probably done it for years. It's almost amazing for an organization to have 500 people not to have a human resources, at least manager or director. So I think all the board members probably agree with that one, that we've been running very lean for many years without this position, but it's probably penny wise and pound foolish too, because there's a number of issues that could catch the district without an HR expert helping us or directing us in that area.
Sure, but do you think that you can get a quality candidate for $90,000 salary starting, or anywhere between 90 and 95, as opposed to just starting out there with 110?
I think, I don't know that it's possible to answer that question. What we would do, Taylor, is we would post a position, we would interview candidates, and then at the point in time when folks were being invited to interview, we would have a discussion about sort of what we believed the salary range would be, and people would either choose to accept or not. And so if there was a hard cap, we would do our best to traverse that. That could become a limiting factor. I don't know. Wouldn't know until we cross that bridge.
And that's just the amount we put in the budget. That doesn't mean it's going to be, like Steve said, what we advertise it for right out the gate.
I move we go ahead with the Director of Human Resources position.
I second the motion.
All right, thank you. A motion's been made and seconded to hire a human resources director. Any discussion or further discussion?
I would just add in, kind of to echo what you said, Peter. I understand, and I hope the community understands, that we have been doing this for a very long time without this position, but we're getting to a breaking point, and we're getting to a point that we could get ourselves in some trouble if we aren't right on top of everything. So I agree that it's long overdue, and it's a position that we need to get in place.
I don't disagree that it's a position that we need. I'm just questioning, I guess, the salary range. That's my issue right out the gate. That's all. I'm in full support, obviously, of the position. I'm just, the salary is.
Any further discussion? Anyone? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote.
Peter,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Marlowe,
Yes.
Roseanne,
Yes.
Kevin,
No.
and Susan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Toby. Well, we still have the other position we haven't discussed at much, the potential for a director of equity.
So, all right, I guess I've got some questions. I have several, actually. I guess the first one is, why do we feel the need? I guess, why is this needed?
I would like to see a written job description on this before we actually discussed it.
Well, that is one of my questions as well. I guess
The quick and dirty answer on this is, Steve and Connie, Ruth, so many of our staff have been just buried in the issues of the last year. And we need someone that can focus on those issues and deal with our equity actions in the district. And there are so many other things falling behind because we can't get our best people focused on what they're supposed to be doing.
I would just add two, I think, kind of two questions. One I heard was kind of why is it needed? Certainly there has been no shortage of energy that has been spent around work with equity specifically, and we have pretty significant and growing to-do list relative to also our corrective action, but things like community engagement, family engagement, support for kids, even frankly post-COVID, and the reality of trying to find ways to better support challenged situations that have risen in the last year to 18 months. So that's certainly part of it. This last month alone, 3 different postings for similar positions that have popped up on WeCan, which is just where public schools post positions for Wisconsin. One titled Coordinator of Culturally Relevant Practices, that was West Dallas, West Milwaukee. One titled Director of Systemic Equity and Inclusion, that was Sun Prairie. And then a third, Director of Equity and Educator Development, that was Waukesha. So those are just 3 that have come up. I think to Kevin's question, we would want to craft a job description that makes sense for us. There are a lot of different things that could fall into this job in terms of the kinds of things we might want for an individual to lead. But certainly when you look at sort of the space in which that individual would work, a lot of it would be outreach to community, to families, to students in terms of developing relationships with our school system. That might mean that when a family chooses to open enroll in or out, that they meet with this individual, or this individual holds regular meetings for those families. They might be a person who helps us develop professional development to work with staff relative to things like trauma-informed practices or restorative practices when it comes to discipline. It might get highlighted from the equity audit that we have to do. So there's a lot of different sorts of things. Certainly, there are sample job descriptions out there, Kevin, so I apologize that I didn't provide that sooner. Didn't want to sort of box us into anything preconceived.
Well, I'm just wondering where this person would get training. I mean, there's college courses and so forth, and HR gets a lot of training in different ways, but I'm just wondering, this is kind of a new field, just how ready are they going to be to handle what we're going to give them? I have a concern with that.
Well, I guess my next question is, I mean, how will this position, I guess, help our district improve areas of reading, science, and math? And I guess what evidence is there to support that an equity director will boost these areas to justify the expense? I mean, I know we've talked about that this will come out of the potential talk as ESSER money, but then that's only one-time money over the next 3 years. I mean, this is a position that, quite frankly, probably won't go away over 3 years. So I don't know. I've heard the talk. I understand where the administration team is coming from and other board members are coming from on this. Respectfully, I'm not in favor of this. I think that money can be better spent elsewhere. That's just me. Again, I'm one person though, so that's my take on it.
I mean, and if I may just address that, I think if the question is, how does it impact our reading, our science, our math performance? There's piles of research out there that would tell us that the number one thing that helps kids perform academically is a sense of belonging and engagement in school. And kids who are feeling disengaged would be, really part of the job of somebody whose role it is to make sure that they're feeling a sense of belonging, a sense of engagement, and kind of supporting the family and the student with some wraparound care. So that you'd hope that one is feeding the other, and that's the premise upon which people would argue that it is doing that very thing in terms of those kids being more successful in their academic endeavors.
I think that last time we discussed this, I think we discussed the fact that maybe the HR person could also take on some of the duties of being a director of equity. Does anyone else remember that when we discussed that?
I do remember that, Roseanne.
Okay.
I recall the discussion, but perhaps incorrectly, I seem to recall that it was discussed that it really wasn't a good idea to combine those 2 positions.
I don't remember that part, but I know they talked about it. Maybe it could be done if we didn't want to have two new positions.
I think we did discuss it, Roseanne and Marlo. I think your recollection is correct, but I tend to agree with Barry. I think these are two different skill sets that the person would have. I think it'd be hard to find somebody. That was my kind of recollection too, though, that it would be struggling to find somebody who could maybe fit both roles. I think we'd be smarter to focus on finding somebody for, each position if we're going to hire both or consider both separately. I'll put it that way, instead of a hybrid type position.
But is the belief that if it's a hybrid position, that the HR director would not be able to facilitate both? Especially when we still have counselors. I mean, as a working in tandem, the HR director with the counselors who do meet one-on-one with the students and everything, wouldn't that also be a viable way to go? Just opening up those lanes between the human resource director and the counselors, the student counselors.
I think the challenge, though, Marlo, would be that right now we've just put forward a corrective action plan with DPI. So over the next few years, we're looking at a mountain of more work in the equity arena. And so to ask our counselors to do that would be above and beyond what they're currently doing to service our students is a challenge. I think that was the point of the equity director. If we don't hire this position, I think we're asking our current administrative team to take on the equity work above and beyond what they're currently doing. So that's I think the reality of where we're at.
I think you run into a potential conflict of interest as well if you have the same person doing HR as well as counseling students.
Well, I'm not talking about necessarily counseling students, but working with the counselors. So I don't know. This just, for me, this just seems such an offshoot type of role. And I understand, with the DPI ruling and the climate that we're in. I guess my concern is, I get the feeling we're not looking for a Band-Aid fix, which is great, but is this, I don't know, is this the most logical step, and is it how, I don't know. I guess I'm having a hard time explaining it, but it's almost like we're going from 0 to 100 without even, in a matter of seconds, as opposed to not gradually getting there with some hastiness, but it's just like we're speeding instead of taking like I said, I'm just having a hard time explaining it, but.
I agree with you, Marlo. I think we're jumping to quick conclusions where I would think that a qualified human resource director could facilitate with the rest of the staff the equity position. Just seems like we're jumping way ahead. I mean, especially when each principal has the ability to be able to, review and hire people, and we have personnel committees, and we have administrative staff that's going to review HR directives. We have outside resources that help us with human resource manuals. There's a lot of opportunities out there where that position could be doable, I would think, but I may be wrong.
I'm open to
As far
creative
as,
ideas on how to solve this situation, but I mean, basically what I'm hearing is let's keep doing what we've been doing, and how those results have been working out for us. Not well.
For me, it's, I think I understand what an equity director would do a little bit more than when he came in here. But it still would be hard for me to vote for it, not exactly knowing exactly what they would be doing. And I think maybe we might need one now, because I don't want our administrative team to have to do some of this work.
But I would like to see maybe like if you could present us with a job description that we could look at and then maybe talk about this again in the next month. I think we would be a little more informed about it. That's kind of where I am with it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Susan, for that comment. And I guess I'll ask the board if we want to make a motion at this point, or do we want to hold over like Susan suggested for another month? Pending a job
Maybe
description.
different. It may be different in the world that I run in, but it just seems that I would be crazy to bring a job to my board and say, I want to hire this position. Well, what exactly is the job description? Well, I don't really know, but it's kind of like this. I mean, you'd think we'd have a written job description, even for the HR director. And most of us understand what that means, but we're gonna put a job posting out there. We should know exactly what those duties and responsibilities are, and level of education, level of experience, those kinds of things. I think they're both critical for both. I hate to put more work on administration, and I certainly agree with Susan that our administration has had a lot of responsibility with things that don't necessarily deal directly with their educational training for these positions. But I think if we're going to add positions, we need to have job descriptions that are detailed so we understand exactly what these responsibilities and duties are going to be.
All right. Well, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate the feedback. And I guess I'll ask other board members then, if do we want to make a motion right now, or should we hold over? I'm kind of getting the sense now we may want to hold this over for a month.
Well, I guess I've got a question. I mean,
There's a motion.
I agree completely with what you're saying, Kevin. We should probably have a job description on this. I guess my concern is we've been talking about both of these positions for probably half to 3/4 of a year. So that job description thing kind of goes both ways. One, we kind of know what we've been talking about. Two, we should probably have a job description by this point if we've been talking about it that long. So how feasible is it for administration to put together a job description for us to review next month?
Well, I already have a job description for HR. It's sitting there. It's ready to go. In fact, there's a good chance I've shared that. I don't know. The director of equity piece, same thing. I could have that ready to go pretty quickly. I did not have the impression that that was something that you wanted in advance. So again, my apologies. And yet I also am unclear as to what all you might want included in there. So I'll just build it the way I think is best, I suppose.
Well, I guess
I just want to say, obviously, I haven't been engaged in the previous conversations as I should have. So I apologize if I'm bringing up old news. But being engaged now, those are kind of things I'd like to look for.
I guess in that description, since I guess sounds like that's the way I think they're going to go here. I guess, can you include some accountability and measurable metrics for goals and success as well? I guess over the span of that position, however you're looking for. I can see people are making faces. So you want the position. What do you want to come out of it? Where do you want to see it grow? Where do you want to see it move to?
Right. I guess the reason I'm sorry, Taylor. I guess the reason I'm kind of wrinkling my eyebrows is I understand where you're going and I understand your concerns, but we don't do that for any other position. We don't say, what's the expectation? What are the benchmarks? We don't do that for any other position we're hiring for.
But why not?
Because that's an administrative duty. That's for administration to deal with, not for us to deal with.
Sure, but this is a lot of money here.
Every position's a lot of money.
Of course it is, but maybe things.
We're approving a job description now. There's no sense we can't move forward with having metrics built into it.
Well,
Steve,
there.
do you have any idea about how many schools around have a director of equity? I mean, I don't know where you're going to get a group of people that are experienced in that or anything. It's kind of a new thing. I mean, how many districts around us have a director of equity? Have found it necessary.
It would be difficult to gather that information only because it's not a typically reported position in terms of what DPI collects. So it would be about making phone calls to districts, but certainly all of our neighboring larger districts have them, and a lot of our more mid-sized colleagues are starting to go down that route, including some of the ones that I mentioned earlier. So I get it, Waukesha, West Allis, Wauwatosa, those are all a little bit larger. Sub Prairie, Madison, Middleton, Verona, those are around the Dane County area. So it matters and kind of depends where you look in the state. Those folks are out there. And again, that's a position that its focus is on really building relationships. And so that is perhaps its own unique skill set, but it's not something that I would try to marry with human resources, which really is focused on accountability measures.
Thank you.
Anything further from board members? All right, hearing nothing. I mean, we don't have a motion on the table, so I guess at this point, I guess we can make a decision later. But we're going to revisit this and talk about a job description.
Can we put a timeline to that so it's not just floating out there?
I'm going to revisit at the next monthly meeting, so it would be not the June meeting, but it'll be at the July meeting. Well, hang on. Let me think about that. Let me ask the board members. Our monthly meeting in June is a week from today. I guess we should revisit that then. We'll have a job description by then.
There's enough job descriptions out there. I looked at them prior to this meeting for the discussion. But, I mean, either way, I'm not in favor of this, so I'll just put that out there. So it is what it is for me. I mean, we just heard the budget, and again, I know that this is going to be talked about for ESSER funds potentially, but again, 3 years from now, it's a whole different story. So I don't feel that we need this. If you want to throw in some of this stuff for the HR position, fine. But yeah, I'm not in favor of this whatsoever. You're not going to get my support on this. Actually, I'm just going to hold my comment what I was just going to say, so I'll yield my comment right now.
Well, I would still like to know, maybe for next week, if you can get it out that fast. I don't know if you can, but if you could just tell us what you would expect this person to do. And, I don't want to have, and if these are things that really do need to be done, I don't want Ruth and Connie and the staff doing it because they've got their own things to do. So maybe if we just kind of have a list as to what this person is expected to do, I think that would really help me out a lot.
I would just add, and I appreciate the sentiment, Susan, that you shared, but I would just add that equity, diversity, inclusion is all of our work. And, that definitely director of equity is necessary, I believe, given the corrective action and the things that might be identified soon in the discipline audit that we're going to have and the equity audit. I think some work will come out of those audits to drive some goals, as you mentioned, Taylor, some metrics, some way of measuring improvement as we move forward. But it doesn't absolve all of us, including board members. I think of leading a district that's equitable and diverse and inclusive. So I appreciate the sentiment that we need someone to help with this work, but I also just want to reiterate that I think from an administrative level, for sure, and teachers, we're all in this together. And it really is going to take all of us to do the work to make the improvements that we want to see.
And just for the record, just because I don't support the creation of this position, doesn't mean that I don't support any of that. So let's just be clear on that, please. You know,
No, I appreciate that, Taylor. Thank you.
Anything further on this topic?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So is it the belief then that we are unable to get to where we want to be without having this position?
I do think it's a big lift, Marlo. I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done. We've started some great work. But I do believe that a director of equity can continue to help move us forward and can get some of that work done even faster for us and allow some other work that perhaps we have not focused on quite as much to be accomplished. So we'll continue to work on it. If there's not a director of equity, we're going to still do the right work. But I do believe a director of equity would certainly elevate our efforts and move us closer to where I think we want to be.
I would just add to that. I think, Marlo, you know, it's hard to quantify or to respond to that, because to Connie's point, we will continue, we have been and will continue to work tirelessly on all things to make our district the very best place that it can be for our kids and for our community. I think, you know, to add to that, I've had board members kind of directly say to me, you know, well, Burlington should be seen for the great district it is, and we're, you know, people don't give us the credit we deserve, whatever. We should be a top 10 district in the state, and we should be known for that. And that requires getting out in front. It requires being a leader. It requires making an investment. And that is what we're coming to you to say that this position represents. It represents being bold, being big, saying we're going to do better. We're going to engage our families more regularly. We're going to be out more visible in supporting our kids when they're struggling. And that might mean a student that's living in poverty. It might mean a student that doesn't speak English at home. It might be a student or a family with a disability. It might be somebody who open enrolls in our district. And we do our very best, and that could be better. And so I think it's hard to quantify, but certainly if the ask is, hey, bring us a job description for next week, we'll get that to you.
Anything further on this? All right, hearing that, let's move on to the second item for action, the DPI corrective action plan requirements, which is an item for discussion. I'm not sure what action we're going to take, but let's discuss. I guess, Steve, can I ask you to jump on this one?
Sure. I mean, this was a direct request from board members to have this be listed as an item on the agenda. And we only listed it as action because if it's a discussion item, which maybe it is, then the board can discuss. But if you then want to take action, you can't. And so we listed it as an action, not knowing if there was any action intended. But this is here for your discussion purposes.
Well, I'm irritated by what the DPI has told us. You know, in Wisconsin, being on the state committee, we have talked about local control, and yet DPI turns around and takes the local control right away from Burlington. And it's interesting to find out that Barbara Van Haren, who is the one I believe sent the letter to us, and Carolyn Stanford Taylor, who are the top two in the DPI, are both leaving. So they won't have a backward glance. They'll be, and the lady that's taking over does not take over until July 1st. So anyway, I don't have a good feeling about this.
Well, so here's a couple other things. There is nothing in Wisconsin state statute or DPI administrative code or rules that tells us that we need to comply with option number 2 at all. So I say we just simply reject number 2 and we move forward. I mean, I think there's sufficient evidence over this last year as to why that would be a very poor decision to honor number 2, the complainant or her designee be invited to participate on the community equity team described in the corrective action plan. Again, there is nothing in Wisconsin state statute or DPI administrative code of rules that would require us to comply with that I can see. So just take that how you want. This is a time for us as a board to, I guess, take a stand and say no to DPI on one thing, and also stand up for, I guess, our students, our staff, our admin team, our community, our tax-paying constituency. That, I mean, the amount of people that I've talked to, I'm sure, I would hope everybody else here has talked to as well about this. And I would hope the message would have been clear. Do not include this individual or anyone that she's associated with in this organization be a part of this discussion. DPI mandate or not. They're not the authority for us down here. I mean, they're an authority, but if they don't have anything in state statute or administrative code of rules, sorry.
Well, let me jump in. I want to echo what Roseanne said and Taylor, that I think this is a poor decision. I don't like the idea of lack of local control. And I think it shows that DPI doesn't have trust in our school district that we can carry out our corrective action plan, and, as we see fit without imposing these conditions on us. Taylor, I haven't researched the administrative code and state statutes. I believe you're right, but I don't doubt you're not right that there's not a specific requirement. I'm pretty confident, though, that DPI does have authority to govern school districts. I guess I don't know. I don't know the legal relationship between DPI and the school district. I'm pretty sure if they issue a corrective action plan, or they require us to submit a corrective action plan, we have to comply with that. I don't think we can say it's not in the statutes that we can't do that. And I think it would be, I thought about this too, but I think it would be a poor choice for us to spend incredible amounts of legal fees fighting DPI on this issue. That's my take, but I mean, I guess other board members can chime in on that one. I think it would be a very, very difficult and expensive fight to go after, DPI on this issue.
Nobody's saying go after DPI. It clearly, and plus here's the other thing. Okay, so I'm just looking at my notes here. If you look at Wisconsin State Statute 118.13, that's their pupil discrimination prohibited. Okay, that's probably the statute that they've been relying on. It's a relatively brief statute, doesn't outline any specifics regarding a district's corrective action plan. Okay, but then you go down to 118.133A-1. That says decisions of the state superintendent under the supervision are subject to judicial review under Chapter 227. Chapter 227 is regarding general administrative procedure and review. Okay, but then when you go into DPI's administrative rules, PI1, complaint resolutions and appeals, there is nothing in there that states a school district shall be required to include the complainant in their corrective action plan. DPI admin rule PI9, pupil non-discrimination. Then if you look at PI 9.08, which is the last section, it spells out the duties of the state superintendent regarding these complaints. PI 9.081A3 states that the state superintendent finds that the board violated statute 118.13 on this chapter, the state superintendent shall issue an order to comply, which include the requirement that the board submit a corrective action plan, including a schedule within 30 days of the board proceeding. Okay, so we did that. Again, nothing in law or administrative code that states that the school superintendent shall require any school district to include the complainant in the corrective action plan. Then DPI also has a webinar that they provide to schools. And then of course, that's on page 4 of their own webinar that states the corrective action plan must detail policies to ensure the findings have been permanently resolved. Additionally, on page 16, they say that they will review the information and may contact the program for additional information or clarification. They do not say they shall make specific requirements. So there you go. Of course, if you want this, I can send this to you, but the point is the amount of money that's already has been spent in legal fees around this, the actions that have taken place by this individual, the attacks again on students, Steve, Connie, the board, area businesses, community leaders. I mean, again, I'm just looking at my notes here. July 2nd, during their protest, they claimed to, they protested in their area business that wanted to be neutral. Okay. July 6th, open letter to BC from that they created, BCDR, states that BASD in Burlington perpetuate racist policies, refers to BASD student body as a largely white and privileged. July 19th, Facebook post from the leader of BCDR passes around a petition to remove SROs from Wisconsin schools. September 1st, 2020, Facebook post from a member of BCDR, BASD supports racism, then calls out the mayor and asks her to step up in support of people of color who live and work in the community, or will she stand in support of the district and white supremacy? September 12th, Facebook post, president of BCR threatens a resident with going to her employer. November 9th, school board meeting, pretty self-explanatory for everyone on this call and probably those watching. November 10th, Facebook post from the president of BCR, pleased with the results of the 11/9 meeting, praised allies from outside of the community who came to show up to create nonviolent tension. I'm sorry, nonviolent tension when the person was called the N-word, I was called cracker, I was called a derogatory slur towards gay people, was told to get the F out of here, was told we're gonna find you. Other board members were spit on, administrator staff threatened, citizens that were in the audience were threatened. November 14th in the video, president of BCR states, to be honest, if I were to file a report on all the racist people in Burlington, I'd be filing a report on the whole town. November 30th in a video, the self-proclaimed president of BCR states, living in Burlington is like living in the 1950s. They are so far behind the racial justice movement that they were outwardly racist and they practiced bigotry openly. December 4th, Facebook post from the president of BCAR makes a post that nails have been planted by white supremacists and that Burlington is trying to hide and cover it up in a reference to their vigil on 11/30. Let's not negate the fact that out of the 59-page police report and from the manager at Veterans Terrace, 54 nails were found, but from what the evidence, long story short with that, there was no evidence of malicious intent, and there were construction crews have been present prior to that event and after the event. Again, January 2021, change.org petition, which had been removed due to hate speech violations. There was language in there that states, unfortunately, this is not the first time Burlington Area School District has come under fire for their support of white supremacy culture. Are you kidding me? So this is the type of stuff that, again, just to refresh your memory, that you want me to support bringing back to the table? Absolutely not. And I think if anybody on this board supports this, you're turning your back on the community, you're turning your back on the student, you're turning your back on our admin team that have quite literally over the last year tried to bend over backwards to support them and help them and make an offer to work with them. I mean, the city task force, they were offered 2 positions on that task force. And they basically told Jeannie Hefty no. And their reasons were that there was little, if any, diversity on the staff of the city's task force facilitator. And then they complained that there were little diversity terms on their website, and there were 0 references to social justice, inclusion, racism, or equity on the website, those terms. So again, this is all just a show of these people. Why give them a platform at this point? I know that some can argue what I just did is giving them another platform, but no, this needs to be exposed because the media hasn't been doing a good job of it. And I'm sick of our people, our community being trashed. And I'm not going to tolerate it. I haven't tolerated it. Neither should you.
And I think the key question there, Taylor, is I don't think we're talking tonight about whether we support adding a member of BCDR to any kind of task force or citizens group. The question here is, DPI has issued approval of our corrective action plan subject to that condition. And the operative question is, are we going to do something about it? Or are we going to take any kind of action? And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, that's all right. Yeah, no, I think that's the question. Are we, and that would mean legal action, I guess, against DPI. But you suggested before, we don't comply. What is our options there? This would be, I guess, a question for our attorneys to ask, those questions. And I don't have the answers off the top of my head. I'm fairly confident, though, we start down this road, it will get very expensive very fast. You may recall a couple of years ago, we had litigation against Schmidt Flooring, right, for the faulty gym floor. We spent 50 grand on legal fees, I think, to resolve that issue. Or, it was a lot of money.
Already spent a lot of money as it is on this other stuff. But
Well, that's also already a sunk cost, though, too. I mean, let's just talk going forward. What are we talking here?
Sure.
Are we prepared to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in a legal battle with DPI over whether we have to comply with their conditions? I'm not commenting on whether these conditions are right or wrong. I'm just saying, what are we doing as a board? And I'm not sure even, I haven't looked into this, whether we have to comply. My guess is I'm 99.9% sure that we're going to have to, work with DPI on a corrective action plan. I don't think we can just say, no, we're not complying.
Peter, I think it would be good to certainly ask the question to our attorneys, but with DPI's directive of identifying the president or a designee, I think that should be more, if we have to comply with that, it should be worded that as a designee from in our district, not just a random designee. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, they could put anybody there. I think it should be somebody from our district. If we have to comply with that, it should be someone from our district.
Yeah, and Kevin, and Taylor, don't hear me wrong. I'm not advocating this or supporting this as a good thing that DPI has given us this condition. Just the question now is, what are our options? And maybe you're right. Maybe we turn this over to our attorneys and say, what options do we have? I guess that's a good question for other board members, because I think we're all speculating at this point on what legal options we may have with respect to this conditions put on the corrective action plan.
I would definitely like to have it turned over to our attorneys to give us some direction on this. It's kind of interesting how the initial DPI ruling came out and this wasn't mentioned at all. And then when, I don't know, social media got involved, some other conversations within the community, person to person, whatever, the president of the coalition actually submitting a letter, asking to be included, having a seat at the table, and how the community responded. And then you get this additional edict from DPI. So I would be very curious as to know how that came to that came to fruition. I'm pretty sure I know how, but I totally agree with Taylor that I just don't see how that works in our favor from a community standpoint. Again, and I'm willing to work with anybody. I will hear anybody's point of view. I may not agree with you, but I will hear it. And I've said this before, I just don't see how they've acted in good faith. I would much rather you call me, a dirty scoundrel to my face, as opposed to smile in my face and say it behind my back. And that I just feel like this isn't going to be beneficial for us either way. It's almost like a lose-lose situation for us. So I would definitely like our attorneys to see what our leeway is, and ultimately try and fight this.
In efforts of time, I would make a motion that we refer this to our attorney for our options, and we can move on to the next subject.
Any seconds?
I second.
Motion's been made and seconded. I'm not sure this is a thing we need a motion for, but I guess we can go forward. Any discussion?
Steve, do you have any comment on this?
I was just going to add, I think,
Dealing with them.
just specific to Marlo and Kevin, I do want you to know that administratively, we did attempt to relay your concerns to the department, Connie and I, as well as your legal representation, to help make sure that they understood that we thought this would potentially be a very difficult thing for our community in terms of how that was going to work. We spent almost 2 weeks attempting to go back and forth, got really very little response, and we were pretty assertive in the variety of concerns we just had to share. We wanted an opportunity to have your voice be heard by DPI, and just so that you know, we were told really no, on no uncertain terms is that going to change, and this is the language. And so, I think to your point, Kevin, and what you just articulated, Marlo, Connie and I, along with folks from Bureau Vetter, did make every effort to address that on your behalf, and unsuccessfully. And so we certainly can circle back, and I can put Bureau Vetter in direct contact with Peter for sure. And if you want them to attend a meeting with all of you, I know they'll be happy to do that. Potentially the nature of that conversation will require a closed session. I'll have to look at whether or not that aligns with statute.
Well, again, if that's the case, where's the authority of again, where in the state statute or their administrative codes or rules gives them the authority to put that type of...
Taylor, I think that's a question for our attorneys. I think we need to move to the next subject.
Well, that's fine, but again, I want that question
We can talk about this all day long, or you guys can, but let's move to the next subject.
Yeah, is there any further discussion on this topic? Otherwise, I know a motion's on the table right now we need to vote on. And for a reminder that the motion is simple. It's are we referring, are we asking our legal counsel to advise us to our options regarding the conditions in the corrective action plan? Hearing no more discussion, I'll call for a roll vote.
Peter,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yep.
Marlo,
Yes.
Roseanne, Kevin,
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Let's move on. Mask requirement.
I would like to make the motion that we make the wearing of masks for the summer optional.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded to make the masks optional and Roseanne, can I get a clarification here for summer school and community ed? I assume that's what you meant.
Yes, for
Okay,
summer.
thank you.
Correct.
Any discussion?
Good.
Yeah, I've got some. I don't understand why we're back at this question again. Literally nothing has changed. Some can say the CDC has said something and all of our neighbors are doing something. And I see the smirk, Marlo. It's not accurate. If every single person who is qualified for that vaccine got it the first day they were qualified, they aren't vaccinated until next week yet. And according to the state of Wisconsin, only 20% of people in that age group have gotten a single shot. And that's the whole state. We told people our decision, we made a decision, and we just keep going back. This is historical with the board. You don't like the decision, just keep bringing it up over and over and over again until you finally get the vote changed the way you want. I don't understand why we're back here again, and it's not productive. We're wasting time.
Okay, so the reason why we're back here again is because some things have changed in the way that the state and the country is reopening. But please remember that we had a vote, I want to say it was April 26th, in regards to in-person meeting. And then we had a follow-up special meeting after that to reverse the initial vote of in-person meeting. That's why we're back at this. So in lieu of the change in the mask mandate, I think it's fair enough to sit there and have another vote on it. Seriously, I mean.
CDC guidelines, as of the 15th, 2 days after the mask requirement was raised, schools should maintain masks.
Yeah, and I agree with Barry on this one, definitely. Over the weekend, the new CDC report came out that there's rising hospitalizations among adolescents in March and April. And also that many teens that teens that have been vaccinated, their recommendation is this: teens should be vaccinated, teens should wear masks, and teens should still social distance. Okay, outdoors is something different. And if you're vaccinated, that's something different too. It's okay to be outdoors for the younger people. But our summer school is indoors, as far as I know. And I'm not sure we're even social distancing indoors. Okay, so a lot of this hospitalization, they say, this came out over the weekend, is due to new variants that have come up, that there's a larger number of teens, they're interacting in in-person learning without masks. And now they're being hospitalized more, The doctors encourage mask wearing among students who are not vaccinated and who, especially when they're indoors. That's the CDC recommendation, everybody. And our job is to keep kids safe. And I tell you, I would rather anytime err on the side of caution rather than to have any kids get COVID in our schools and then maybe pass them on to grandma. I don't want to see that happening. Okay.
So what are the actual numbers for the state of Wisconsin in regards to COVID cases?
Some numbers that I heard at the end of May, let's see, that the adolescents accounted for 24% of all new cases. Of all new cases as of the end of May, which was just a week ago or so. So it's on the rise. I mean, it is on the rise. They're saying that that's on the rise. And we're talking about kids here who are not vaccinated being indoors without masks. The CDC is saying you should not do that.
Okay, so as of today at 3 o'clock, Racine County numbers, percentage of Racine County residents who've received at least one dose, we're at 44.6%, so that's 87,580. So there's that. Percentage of Racine County residents who have completed the full vaccine series of 38.8%, that's 76,213. The age demographics, For at least one for 12 to 15 is at 15%. For ages 16 to 17, they're at 26% for who have at least received one dose. 18 to 24, you're in 34.4%. Total population of Racine County is 195,398. Since we last met a month ago, numbers have actually gone down in Wisconsin and Racine County. If you want to break it down by region, 47% of the southeast region of Wisconsin have received at least one dose of the vaccine. Again, this is all today at 3 o'clock.
That's also adults. That's not just, I'm talking, you and I are talking about kids that are elementary school age.
Okay, so
And that 44% for adults also, that's not that great. 44%, when we're trying to get up to 70% by July 4th, you're talking 44%. Wisconsin is not doing that well in vaccinations.
Well, whose fault is that then, I guess, right? So Wisconsin numbers. Percentage of people in Wisconsin have received at least one dose, 48.5%. So you're looking at 2.8 million people. Again, ages 12 to 15, you're at 22%, 16 to 17, 33.6%, 18 to 24, 39%. Percentage of Wisconsin residents who have completed the full vax series, 43%, so 2.5 million. In that age bracket, 12 to 15, you're at 4.8%, 16 to 17 years of age, you're at 25.6, 18 to 24, you were at 32.3.
Taylor, we've talked before. You're huge on stats, and I love that about you. But in what realm is under 50% a good number for you?
I'm just going by the numbers.
That's what I'm saying. In what realm is under 50% a good number? And that's overall vaccinations. That's not students, which we're here to talk about. Students, you didn't have anything above 15%.
Sure.
Except 18 and over.
Well, no, that's not true. 12 to 15% for Racine County residents.
15, right? 1-5?
Yeah.
That's what I said, nothing over 15%.
Okay.
Since our last meeting, when we made this discussion, we have had 27 emails on this. 75% of them from the same last name. There's not a big outcry from the district to remove this mask mandate.
I mean, if you want to talk COVID deaths by age group, ages 0 to 9, 0%.
I don't want to talk about that.
10 to 19,
Can we move on with our motion?
Well, we're still in a discussion.
I call the question. Can I do that?
It would require a vote, Susan.
It's just
no
time to
active
move on
cases in
with
Burlington
this.
right now. There are no active cases in Burlington right now. No active cases in Walworth, in Lyons, Spring Prairie.
Let's have
Lyons, Spring Prairie, town of Burlington.
Fresh
No
case south
active
of us just today.
let's set some other. I'd like to hear from Roseanne.
Go.
Roseanne and Kevin, do you have discussion on this item? Because
Yeah, I made the motion. I talked to some people in Racine County and they think it's okay for us to go back. I talked to other school districts who had also looked into it. And I don't know, I think it's a good thing to do it this summer. I talked to the president of Lake Geneva and they thought about it and talked about it at their board meeting and decided to go for the summer without masks. So I don't know, I don't see a real, I don't know. I looked at some statistics too, and I don't think the kids are not catching this as adults do. And I don't know, I just don't think they need to have masks anymore.
The thing is,
Waterford's maintaining it, and the case south of us is a kindergartner.
and there's a rise in hospitalizations now, and that's the thing, we don't have to do what every other
I'm not saying
around
that.
us does either.
I'm not saying that. I didn't say that.
how about you, Kevin? Do you have some discussion points? Some words of wisdom, please.
I don't have any. I'm actually in a hospital right now. I could ask them.
Ask him in Portuguese. He's visiting somebody from Brazil.
Yeah, this is a tough issue. I mean, I'm on the fence too. I hear Roseanne's, I'm listening to Barry and Susan, and I've gone back and forth on this issue. So I'm not sure how I feel. It's a tough one. I believe, I did hear a report last week. The CDC director said that they're fairly confident by the fall, the recommendations from the CDC will be no masks. I may be totally misparaphrasing that, but there was a news article about that. The guidance for summer school, or excuse me, for camps in summer school, I believe they said, excuse me, if you're vaccinated, that's fine. You can go without a mask, but if you're not, you should still mask up inside. This
motion is optional for the parents who want their children to wear masks. They can. But though, if the kids don't want, they don't have to, because the word optional was in there.
Yes, but it's the optional word that lets people that are infected come to school.
No, they aren't going to come to
Yes.
school if they're infected. If they've got the disease, they're not coming to school.
What's going to stop them?
The same thing that would stop them if they were wearing a mask and were sick.
I think we've proven that's not true.
Well, I think it's time for a roll call unless someone else has some discussion. I think we've beaten this one to death over many meetings. And I know we get to revisit again one more time because the fall hasn't been decided. So this is just to be clear, summer school community ed coming up. So Toby, will you give us a roll call vote, please? Oh, and this is to make masks optional, just to be clear. So your vote.
Okay. Peter,
Yes.
Barry,
Nope.
Taylor,
Yes.
Marlo,
Yes.
Roseanne,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Susan.
No.
All right. Well, thank you. Before we move on, we have the last item on action is the bylaws and policies. I do want to let the board know it's good that we've got the mask issue resolved. For our next meeting plan on the agenda, we're going to discuss going back in person. And I guess I'll just say this, Barry, you raised a good point before. I don't think we're necessarily revisiting these issues because things are changing rapidly with COVID. So I don't see any harm in revisiting the issue here for both masks and going back in person. But just I'm putting that out there as a heads up to board members. It'll be on our agenda for next meeting. But let's move on to
that nothing's statistically changed.
Fair point. I guess I'll let you have the last word on that one. Marlo, you want the last word? No, let's cut it off right here. Let's go on to the policies, please.
No, I was going to ask about the in-person meeting. Was there a particular reason why it didn't make the agenda for today?
Yeah, I decided, one, I wanted to deal with masks tonight, and I knew this was going to be hard, and we had a lot of things that are a thing. The other issue, though, is it's going to be a challenge for us when we go back in person, Marlo. And I wanted us to have the ability to have a good plan coming up. We've been very busy as a district and administrative and board team the last month. And
it's not me.
I think it's a Turk household. We're okay, but sorry about that. No, I thought it would be helpful for us to have more time to come up with a plan, because I know when we go back in person, we're going to have to make careful plans on how we conduct it. And I expect to have a robust turnout, which is great, but I want to make sure we are well organized and well equipped to do that. And I think having a vote on the next monthly meeting will be perfect, because then it'll give us time to come up with a good plan. And so that was my thinking.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thank
Thanks.
you. Sure. We had two policies on deck that we've held over at least once, maybe twice now. And I think it would be nice if we could get some resolution. And we've all been tasked with homework over the last month to look at these two policies. One is 143.2 board information requests. And the other one is 144.4, board member behavior and code of conduct. I'm going to suggest, why don't we tackle one at a time? And let's start with the board member behavior and code of conduct. If people have any comments on that, I guess let's have them now.
I like it just the way it's written. I think it's well done. Neola knows what they're doing. I like it just the way it is.
Great, thanks. Anybody else? Because I know, Taylor, I did get comments from you or revisions. So thank you for sending those. That was helpful for me for going through it. Anyone else have comments?
I'm also fine with the way it is. I like it. I don't have any revisions to it, but I'm certainly willing to listen to whoever does have a revision.
Yeah, so, all right, I guess under board member interaction with staff, under the section where it says no board member has inherent authority, strike that entire section. Under board member records and confidentiality, just that first section where it says board members are expected, and then where it ends, not maintained by the district, strike that entire section. And then under enforcement, I would like to eliminate letter B and letter C.
So Taylor, can I ask you on the first paragraph? So it's under board member interaction with staff.
We'll wait for him.
Sorry, I got a fire alarm issue. I don't know what's going on here. Why is your change there? Because I believe that's true. I mean, we don't have, as an individual board member, we don't have any inherent authority to require a staff member. Only a board as a collective does.
Well, I guess I was looking at it from an administrative standpoint. That was the way I took that.
What do you mean by that? Can you give me more clarification? I'm open to your idea. I just don't know where you're coming from on this one.
So like if I wanted to reach out to say Ruth or Connie or whoever, to just ask a simple question. I don't, and just ask for like some additional clarification or information on something. I mean, I don't think I should have to feel restricted to do that.
I don't think it reads that because I'm looking at the language, and I agree with you, Taylor. I mean, obviously, if you want to ask Ruth a question, I certainly don't think anyone wants any board member to feel like they can't reach out to anybody in the administrative staff to ask a question. But this is, I think, saying no board member has inherent authority to require, and that's the key word there, to require. So
Sure.
you can't go to an administrative staff member and say, I want X, Y, Z from you.
Yeah, that's fine.
What was the second section, Taylor? I guess I'm struggling.
It's
with that
under
too.
board member records and confidentiality.
Okay.
Just that first section, board members, and then where it ends by not maintained by the district. I mean, I think whenever we've seen open records requests come through, they've kind of just been handled by the district.
Right, but I think that particular part is state law.
Well, if that's the case, then I guess we'll have to leave that, right?
I may be wrong, someone can correct me, but I think that's why that's in there, because I think board members are responsible for maintaining their own public records. Now, you're not responsible necessarily for your emails on the district email. The district helps you out with that, but
Sure.
any communications, like if you wrote a letter or something or received a letter from someone, that
Yeah.
in theory is a record you need to maintain.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
I'm fine with removing B in enforcement too. I think that's kind of a non-issue, or I don't know how other people feel about that.
Well, if it's a non-issue, why do we have to change it? You know?
Well, I shouldn't say non-issue. I just don't think it's, I mean, there's plenty in the enforcement section, I think, to, the censure is a pretty harsh thing. Efforts to remove the board member for office with cause. Frankly, we don't have committees right now. Well, we will, I think we will in the future.
And also in this, it says the board may consider the following. And then B is listed under there. So it's not saying that you have to do it or you don't have to do it.
I guess it
My
depends on the board.
Yeah, my only concern with the entire policy was that it's the board president's authorized to continue to hold that assignment. I think that should be the decision of the board as a whole, not necessarily any one person.
Barry, can you just tell me what you just stated? Where is that? Because does it show up more than once? I just want to make sure I have it notated.
So enforcement B, removal from the board committee assignments for the remainder of the year and until the following organizational meeting of the board, at which time the president is authorized to continue to withhold committee assignments. I think
Okay,
that should be the board.
You're specifically talking about letter B, not where it's stated earlier. Like in the opening third paragraph, there's a comment about the board president. You're talking about letter B.
Yes, there was another one in here, but I couldn't. No, I'm not worried about the board president authorized to make public statements. That's perfectly fine.
Yep, I just wanted to be sure I was following you. Thanks.
I mean, I think C as well. I mean, I don't see how you can restrict a board member from requesting items from being from I guess a board member agenda.
I mean, it's one of the few things you can actually do. And it doesn't mean you necessarily agree with it, but it's one of the few things the board can do.
Could you read that part again? I don't have it right here.
Restriction on board. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Taylor. I apologize.
Restriction on board member rights granted by policy, including requesting items for board meeting agenda.
I think what they're getting at here is, so I'm looking at the enforcement mechanisms. A is a censure. These are pretty bad. These are rogue board member issues. B and C, though, are kind of like the next levels. It would be like removal from committees. And then C is like, you're not participating in our meetings. D is removal from office. So it's like almost stepping up. It's A, B, C, D. E is law enforcement. Now we're really getting, now it's getting terrible. And then F's just a catch-all. So I think it kind of flows. It's A, B, C, D, E. I guess now I'm reading it again. I almost think B and C should be in there because it could be different levels of enforcement if things got really bad. I mean, these are cases where a board member is, I'll call it rogue. I mean, somebody's gone is just acting outside the boundaries of normal board behavior.
And again, these are only things that we can consider. I mean, we don't have to do them unless we want to do them.
Well, again, at the end of the day, we're accountable to the electorate. That's where it really matters.
Yeah, but I think the issue there, Taylor, would be like you're talking maybe a recall. Is that what you're saying? Like, let's say you have a board member who's gone rogue and then they get recalled. The problem is that takes a while. So you could have a dysfunctional board floundering for months while somebody's trying to get recalled.
Sure. Yeah.
I guess I'd like to see B or C left in there because otherwise you're left with either formal censure and then D is referral to proceed to remove a board member.
I move we approve the policy as noted, or sorry, as written with the editing of enforcement B to be at which time the board is authorized to continue.
Second.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Okay, would you just explain that motion to me again?
Sure, I can summarize it. It's leaving the policy essentially as is, as completely written, except for enforcement section B, where it says at which the clause that starts at which time the president is authorized to continue to withhold the committee assignment. It should read at which time the board is authorized. So it's taking all essentially responsibility out of the president's position, which is good. I think I like that change too.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a roll call.
Peter,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Marlowe,
Yes.
Roseanne,
Yes.
Kevin, you left. Susan,
Yes.
thank you.
Oh, excuse me. We have one more. So now we're looking at 143.2, the Neola request on board member information requests. And Taylor, I know you had a number of revisions on this one. I don't know if we want to, has everyone looked at those? I guess that'd be my question, or do we want to?
I don't have them in front of me, but I've looked at them.
Okay.
And again, I thought it was well done. I liked it.
As is you
Yeah,
saying, Roseanne?
I did.
Okay.
Because one of us shouldn't have the ability to take so much time away from our secretaries and whoever else has to dig up all the information.
Well, again, I think the problem with these sorts of things is if you don't have a policy in place, it can be abused like nuts. But putting a policy in place seems to handcuff people. And it's a difficult spot to be in. Because I certainly would think if I have a request for, I'd like more information about blah, I shouldn't have to wait a month and a half to get through board approval to get information about blah. If it's a reasonable request, the superintendent or their designee should be able to say, yeah, no problem, I can take care of that. But if we don't have a policy saying that I can't just suck up all your time willy-nilly at my own, choice, then we're in trouble. So this is where I was getting last time when we talked about this, where I think this is an important policy. I'm just hung up on how it's executed, because you could certainly say it's in place to protect us from someone that's really abusing the staff and their time, but it also hamstrings just the average question if you follow the letter of the law, or the letter of the policy, I should say.
I guess I didn't that way.
Yeah, Taylor, Barry, let me ask you that question on the second thing you just said. Where in the policy specifically does it hamstring a board member? Because I agree with you wholeheartedly, that is concern, because I don't want to dampen anyone's ability to get the information they need to make informed decisions.
So there are a number of places, I'm sorry, Taylor. There's a number of places through here that you could point to it, but I'll just point to B because it's one of the first ones. When a board member would like administration to compile information which will require lengthy research and investigation, we don't have to go further. What's lengthy? Is that 30 minutes? Is it an hour? Is it 2 hours? If it's 2 hours, do I just break my request up into 2 1-hour requests? I mean, I don't like playing these sorts of poke around games with things. I want to have something to protect our administration from having to deal with, futile requests. I also think it's the responsibility of our board to be on the same page and moving towards the same goal versus one person off on a tangent digging into something that the board's not focused on. So I understand the importance of this. I just wonder if it's going to tie us up from just day-to-day operation.
Wouldn't the superintendent make that determination then? Because that's what you'd have to just submit the request. If the superintendent says, this is lengthy, and they'd be the person who would know that. With this current board, I have full confidence that this is not going to be an issue, but this is more a proactive policy that could protect us against a rogue member in the future.
Well, yeah. So again, I think that's where I would hope that there would be a good enough relationship with the board member and superintendent, where the superintendent, and this has been done in the past, this has been done in the past, where they could just narrow it down and say, maybe have a conversation about what exactly you are looking for, because this is kind of a wide range. You're looking from A to J. Maybe I can identify what you're looking for and narrow this down from A to D, where again, I think a lot of it is just conversation. So, for me, I would like to just remove in letter A. Actually, we'll just keep this one sentence. Individual board members possess all rights granted to them as citizens of the community, including access to public records. Everything else from that, I feel, should go. Under letter B, where it says, to be in the third line under where it says, the requests will be reviewed at the next meeting if possible. I would just like to strike that. And where it says by the board and superintendent, I would like to strike out where it says board and. So it just is by the superintendent to clarify the request and determine in the context of other priorities. If and, I'd like to strike if and, when the administrative staff should respond to it. And then I would like to, again, this is still in B, completely remove that last sentence, the request, discussions of them, etc. Where it says, yeah. So I've got little side notes here where it says the information request is already a public record when it comes in via email. I'd like to strip C, where it says all requests are valid. It's not up to the superintendent or board to determine the intent or the validity of the request. Per Wisconsin state statute 19.351-I, the request may be refused because the person making the request is unwilling to be identified or to state the purpose of the request. So that's state statute. So
Yeah, but Taylor, I think that's wrong because we're talking only about here. If you read at the beginning of A, the second sentence in A, this is a narrow policy. It's talking about requests by individual board members for documents which would be exempt by disclosure to the general public. So as a board member, you have by state law, by open record request, the right as any citizen in the community to make an open records request. This policy is narrowly addressing the requests that go above and beyond open records law.
Okay.
I guess Taylor, I'll say this. I don't necessarily disagree with your changes. I just say, if we're gonna make your changes, why I would scrap the whole thing. Because there's no point in having the policy at that point.
Yeah, first I would like to see the entire thing go away.
Yeah,
but I made these changes because the request was do your homework. And I felt that, in my opinion, this was somewhat of a fair because I added, again, a couple things, but, you know, I felt my changes would still maintain the integrity of what we're all talking about here. But, you know, and again, for letter C, when I reference the state statute, I mean, that quote comes, again, is in state statute, but it also comes from the 2019 edition of the Wisconsin Public Records Law Compliance Guide, which is, you know, again, released by the DOJ and by Attorney General Collins.
But again, what Peter said before, Taylor, these aren't records that are subject to public records requests. These are different records.
No, I understand, but I guess I just questioned maybe it was the timing and the intent of this when this first initially came up.
Well, I think what was discussed at the time is Neola was hearing requests for this because a lot of boards were experiencing a lot of strife in the last year with a lot of stuff going on. And what I like about this policy is that it gives our administration some degree of pushback. You know, by and large, our administration has been fantastic with requests. But if they're just getting bombarded with requests that really aren't, you know, something that the board is focused on or that there's time to accomplish in what's happening, I think they should be able to say, we don't have time for that right now. If the board as a whole wants those things, then the board's going to request them. But if one person, you know, if I want to know what we've spent on AA batteries for the last 14 years, and I want Ruth to have that alphabetized and categorized and itemized by tomorrow, it just doesn't make any sense. So there has to be some degree, some option for the administration to say, that's not something we're going to dig into right now.
Are you ready for a motion, Peter?
Absolutely, because I'm dealing with a rogue fire alarm here, and I'm getting requests from my family to stop the beeping. So please, let's get this done.
I move that we leave leave it just as it is. The way it was written, I think they do research on it. And I think it's very good, just the way it's written, the policy.
I second the motion.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call.
Peter,
Yes.
Barry,
No,
Taylor,
No,
Marlowe,
No,
Roseanne,
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
All right, the motion fails, 3-3. So that's all we have for our agenda tonight. So I guess I'd call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I knew we
Thank
adjourned.
you.
Can I just circle back really quick, Peter, just on one thing, and that is with the approval earlier that masks will be optional for community ed and summer school. I just want to make sure the board knows there's still a federal order that requires masks on public transportation, and school buses are public transportation. So just as an aside, I should have said this earlier and I didn't, and I want to clarify for not only all of us, but those who are viewing from home, that we can't control that federal order on school buses. And so when school buses are involved, kids will still have to have masks until the federal government changes that order. But what you said pertains to all of our buildings and all of our campuses. So just for a point of clarification, because I see we've already gotten communication on that.
Steve,
Sorry
thank
about
you. I'm sure the folks at Thomas Bus will thank you too, because that'll head off some questions. So I've heard a motion. I believe I heard a second on adjournment. Toby, roll call, please.
Peter,
Yes.
Barry,
yes.
Taylor,
yes.
Marlowe,
yes.
Roseanne, Susan.
Yes.
Just quick question, actually, before we officially go. I see WASBA's doing the summer leadership trainings again. Is anybody going to that
I
in
am.
July?
I am.
Okay, you are. Okay.
Yes, I
Susan?
am.
Nobody else going?
I'm still trying to coordinate. I've got some big things going down at work right now, so. Day job comes first. Got to pay the bills.
I'll be, just to give you a little heads up, I'm going to be in Madison. I'm going to, tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday, I'm going to be attending virtually the National School Board Association meetings, and I'm going to get a chance to meet with our officials in Washington, DC. So I'm hoping I can put some good facts about Burlington in when I'm talking to Ron Johnson and some of those, Tandy Baldwin and all the rest of them. So it's not going to be too many people, so I'll have a chance to talk back and forth with them. So I'm going to try to push for some extra, I know they've heard it, but extra money for special ed and things like that. So I'm excited about it. And then Friday and Saturday, I'll be up at Madison with the WASB. So again, it's nice to toot Burlington's horn because I think we have a great district and there are lots of things that we do well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.